Written below are the journal entries of Christopher Young, brother of Daryl Young, found saved as individual files on his personal computer, with file names prologue, doc, ch1.doc, ch2.doc, etc. Apart from being compiled into one document, they have not been altered in any way. Prologue. 2 weeks later, there was a sound, there was a humming. It came from that place on the carpet, the spot near the corner. His spot. ch1. I'm getting concerned. I guess I was a bit distracted before, but my mind is clear now. They're gone, and I am frankly growing more concerned by the minute. A chalk-white amorphous thing. A hideous, absolutely hideous thing. I saw it. I saw it on the rug, and it scared me. It looked at me, grinning with half-formed white eyes filmed over. It writhed towards me. A heat, some sort of sickening heat radiated from it, and it saw my disgust and thrived upon it. I had hoped it would live in one of the closets, but it was content to ooze about my home, leaving trails as it went. I am quite sure that if I had not put the towel under the bathroom door it would have tried to come in and join me while I bathed myself. ch2. Today it has appendages. I am not sure if they existed before, but now they most certainly do. It has two, with one on either side. And it crawls haphazardly along like some sort of horrid lopsided insect. It tried to follow me out through the door, but I kicked it and it did not try any longer. It thumps around as I try to sleep, dragging its body everywhere and leaving residue all over the house. I took my cat to Daryl's. The thing didn't follow me. I'm glad. It may get me, but it will not get my cat. ch3. And now has 4 appendages and is beginning to form a skull-like dome under its pulsing skin. It has a mouth, a crooked little mouth, and I am afraid it will begin to make sounds at me. 3 of the appendages are longer than the 4th, so it mostly wobbles around in crooked little circles. It is getting bigger, and it never stops changing. I was hoping it would stay and become some sort of indiscernible monster, but now I am sure that it is becoming a person, or at the very least something similar. I would like to kill it. I wonder if I could. ch4. The appendages are even now. It's disgusting, with abhorrent little limbs forming perfectly. They're currently flippers and nubs, cartilage and bright blue veins under translucent white skin. It sits and stares at me as the cat did, but instead of curiosity it looks on with a hunger and a disquieting energy, just as the cat's did. However, its eyes reflect the slightest light in the darkness. They're omnipresent and wide and green and yellow as I try to sleep. The eyes are not, yet, the same size, which only serves to make the thing more unnerving. ch5. It sits at the top of the stairs, waiting for me, smiling down at me with crooked reflective eyes and a small mouth full of small black teeth. My bedroom is upstairs. I am afraid to go up. It also has hands and feet now. The nubs gave way to small, slender fingers and toes. It is beginning to walk and climb about, and there are small white handprints smudged on all of the doorknobs. I think at this point towels will do me no good. ch6. It can open doors. I'm sure of it now. It's androgynous in anatomy, but for him I think it male. It still smiles at me and stares, but says nothing. A small mercy. ch7. Last night I picked up a fairy-tale anthology and decided to read it while resting in the rocking chair next to my bedroom window. In response, the accursed thing stood in my doorway, leering at me, intent to ruin any escape. It succeeded. Frustration and fear gave way to rage, and I pushed up the window, ripped a hole in the screen, and flung the book outside into the night. The thing ventured down the stairs, in and out the front door, and brought the book back in arms, snaking against and over the arm of my chair, depositing the small book in my lap, complete with bony handprint. That was the closest it had ever gotten to me. I became frightened. I stared at the thing and then tossed the old book to the carpet. To think, to only have to deal with a beating beneath the floorboards. This thing mocked me and tormented me and lived and breathed and watched. It looked at the book for a moment, then curled up in the corner and stared at me, large uneven eyes with skin pulled back around. It stared at me and smiled with its little teeth. ch8. The thing has started polluting my food or hiding it or both. and I found that shampoo burns my scalp and razors jut from the pages of my books. No longer content to mull around and lurk in corners, it is now actively making my life miserable. Ch9 Eventually, I had no choice but to venture out to the local supermarket and replace my now useless toiletries and food. I had become accustomed to it staying at my home, content to violate my private space, but I always held a suspicion it would begin to follow me. My fear was confirmed. I drove to the store, did my shopping, and checked out. Nothing unusual happened. I walked outside. Nothing. I approached my car and believed to have seen it, but had not. I then glanced up and saw it. It was far away. I do not know if it was making an attempt to hide, but it was there, looking at me, half hidden behind the tree. Our eyes met, and I shivered. It appeared pleased, then it crawled its thin body back behind the tree, paused, and stuck its head out to continue watching me. The eyes were even, but they seemed to be getting larger, and darker, and more vacant. Even from the distance between the two of us they stood out much against the bleached skin that surrounded them. It smiled, but showed no teeth. I suppose it did not want to show them in public. I wondered what it had planned for me. I blinked and it was gone. I paused for a moment, worried it would appear somewhere closer, but nothing happened. I then packed up the groceries and returned home. I stopped, retrieved my mail, pulled up, parked, got out, glanced up, and a light happened to catch my eye. I saw a foreign light my bedroom window. Faintly silhouetted against my window was the thing, staring intently down at me, shuddering against the glass, violating my room. I'm sure it had been watching the entire time, waiting for me to notice. In silhouette it looked so much like a person now, though was really little more than a lumpy childlike skeleton with enormous dark eyes. If I killed it, would the authorities come back and blame me for killing a person? I wondered if it would try to snake a hand through the hole in the screen and reach for me. Ch11 Last night I sat on the couch flipping channels, desperate for any distraction or escape. The phone was next to me, but I was too afraid to call anyone for help, lest what happened before be found out. It must be said, though, that the pressure was becoming unbearable. It sat in his corner again, sat in a sphinx-like position despite looking so human now. And just as I hit the one channel with static for the umpteenth time the thing in the corner began to whisper. I ignored it and changed the channel, hoping it would shut up. Its whispering merely grew in speed and intensity, and while it did not move, its eyes reflected the television screen and widened and its small chest heaved as it rattled off. I turned up the volume and began flipping rapidly, infomercial then sports channel then a cartoon, then suddenly his face was on the screen, tongue lolling out in blue face gasping for air and mercy, and the thing was in front of me and in front of the television. Facing me, gibbering and staring, and I screamed over it and the television and the room went dark. Ch12 This is too much, and I understand now the extent of blind terror the idea of certain death instinctively brings about in people. I have known the thrill of killing and the fear of being caught, but neither the idea of retribution nor of my life itself ending were ever real to me. The mere thought of this thing, however, drives a black and bleak and cold and nearly unbearable fear to my core. Let alone the feeling that I get when I feel it mulling about my room at night or when I awake to find small bruises, cuts, and white chalky smudges on my person. I want to kill it, but I don't know what would happen if I tried. I don't know what to do. Ch13 I'll say it here, maybe it will help. It has been a while, but I killed him. It's all clean, but I did it. He looked at me and looked at me and looked at me and would not stop. I should have known he would never stop. I knocked him down and strangled him until his throat collapsed under my thumbs and I dumped the body somewhere far away. At first I had nightmares about him screaming, then wheezing, then his eyes and skin bursting like blood and confetti. I had them every night. Then the police left, and I was left to read in my warm bed with my cat sleeping alongside me or pulling at the pages. The investigation ceased, the nightmares ceased, and I was at peace. Then the humming started. The humming and the warmth all over, and I can see its reflection in my computer monitor. Ch14 My home, my bed, my person, And now my dreams, I'm having nightmares again, but they're much, much worse. In my dreams it's there. It has no eyes, but it stands tall and with its wide mouth and talks to me and laughs at me and screams and looks ready to devour me. Sometimes I understand its words and sometimes they're incomprehensible, but whenever I wake up I cannot remember their precise nature. The dreams feel dark and hot and cramped and I wonder if anything worse could possibly happen to me if I die. I wonder if it would depend on if it killed me or if someone else did. Ch15 Maybe I will do it. I have a pistol in a box in my bedroom closet, and if I were to fling the thing from its watching place down the stairs it would give me enough time to run and grab the gun. I just wouldn't be sure who to use it on. I have worried about the thing reading these entries and figuring out my intentions, but I have not seen any evidence of it examining the keyboard or monitor. I comfort myself in regards to this matter by believing that its form of comprehension is much too primal and hunger-driven to allow for much complex thought. Maybe I'm a fool. Maybe it knows everything. Regardless, it's in my dreams and my brain and every waking moment and I am determined to end it. Ch16 I found my solution. I purchased a shotgun. If we're both within range when I pull the trigger, it should do the trick. Wish me luck. Ch17 Why didn't I die? Why didn't it die? Ch18 I don't understand. I cleaned the carpet after before but now it's soaked with blood. I wonder if with the way my head is, looking at it is like a mirror because I bled like a person and the thing bled black and it's all everywhere and I haven't looked in the mirror but I blasted half of its skull off and there are bits of red and blue flesh everywhere and it's still looking at me, leering at me, smiling at me, spurting and bleeding at me. The keyboard is covered in my blood and I don't know how long I can keep this up. I only have one idea left. I think I am going to go far away. Written above are the journal entries of Christopher Young, found dead in a rock quarry next to the mutilated, partially decomposed, and recently moved remains of Sean Dawes, his young neighbor and former friend. Dawes's death was one of head trauma followed by strangulation, but Young's cause of death is as of yet undetermined, though he was malnourished and his hygienic state was in vast disrepair. In fact, thanks to his physical and mental state leading up to his death, it is uncertain how he managed to drive the relatively great length from his home to the quarry in which he ended up. It is also worth mentioning that neither fresh blood nor any of the firearms Young mentions in his writing were found in his home. All our forensics team found were older traces on the carpet and mantel corner that likely belonged to Dawes. We're currently probing autopsy reports for any information they can provide on Young's mental health from Dawes's death onward and requesting further investigation by every department involved. All we have to go on in regards to Young apart from his cadaver's physical state and these entries is virtually nil. As of my writing this, we haven't come up with a single witness or piece of evidence outside of what I mentioned above, apart from an interview with Daryl, Christopher's brother. To be frank with you, even said interview it was fruitless. He was distraught at the death of his younger brother, but said that Young seemed perfectly content and had claimed he was going on a vacation and that his cat would only need to be taken care of for about a week minimum. The two bodies were found 5 days later in the quarry, meaning that if the older of the Young brothers is being truthful, and isn't afflicted with his brother's psychosis, Young's physical and mental deterioration happened much more quickly than we had first assumed, and much more quickly than should have been possible. I'll keep you updated as we learn more, of course. It's all very strange. Thanks for the help. Yours truly, Police Department. Credited to Strussy. Post views, 5,108. Please wait. Another night here in this secluded and heavily secured room. It's a solitary one, with only the light of the moon to keep me company. I look at the farm buildings outside my window, and all I can do is remember. I remember that night, that place, that thing. I remember Black, and honestly, I think Black remembers me. At first glance, the town of Black in Maryland's Carroll County is a traditional small town. Upon further inspection, However, one notices that there is some intangible quality that makes black seem distant from what we define as reality, as well as this surrealist air. There are no ichthyi nor crosses nor stars of David nor crescents accented with stars. Nor are there pentagrams nor anything to indicate a faith of the mundane world. There are no religious buildings as well, whether they be churches or cathedrals or synagogues or anything of that nature. Another thing is that, while the buildings are normal, the flags they bear are not those of America, as would be the case in the mainstream American small town. Rather, they bear a black field with a strange white symbol upon it. If you were to show this symbol to an engineer, they might mistake it for a schematic drawing of an unusual circuit, but they would be wrong. When I first laid eyes upon it, it seemed vaguely familiar. I seem to recall that I caught a glimpse of the symbol upon a bookshelf of an eccentric I had interviewed a few days earlier on the vampire subculture. The symbol itself strikes a number of internal inquiries, ranging from what it is to what future it could bring to the rest of this world. The most noticeable thing, however, is evident more during the day than at night, for the people of black are rarely out during the day, but hustle and bustle about at night. It creates a number of questions within the mind of the outsider who passes through the town. However, if said outsider asks the people of black about this practice, locals will give varied responses, ranging from changing the subject to the denizen requesting the visitor not to worry about it. That's what happened when I visited black. I was sent by Towson University as a study in societies whose circadian rhythms had been reversed due to external reasons. I was in the local diner when I told people this. Of course, I had to explain what it meant, using the pre-Columbian Pueblo tribe as an example. The waitress to whom I gave the explanation simply replied that she believed that the people of black just prefer the night over the day. However, I got a suspicious feeling that a mass personal preference wasn't entirely true. I needed to know the truth for my study, but I had no idea how I was going to get it. It was after I had paid for my fried chicken and was leaving the diner that I found a method for acquiring the information I needed. A busboy of about 18 years old brushed by me. He murmured to me to meet him outside Donnelly Park after his shift ended at 5 a.m. It seemed a little late to be out, but I decided I needed the truth more than I needed the sleep. The next few hours were spent wandering through black, wondering what could be so important that the busboy couldn't tell me at the diner. What could be black's great secret? I had no idea, nor could I foresee the grave results it would take on my heart, soul, and sanity. As the appointed hour grew closer, it seemed that people were shutting down their businesses and returning to their homes. The later it got, the more I heard the faint sound of some kind of song coming from the houses of black. It sounded Tibetan, with what sounded to be throaty chanting with undertones of bells and singing bowls. But I realized there was more to it than that. When I started into my car to go to Donnelly Park, something told me not to drive there. I had no idea whether it was just a hunch or some greater power at work, but I decided to walk to the park. It was a good thing I did, for as I was about to enter through the wrought iron gate, something pulled me into the bushes with a swift motion. It was the busboy from the diner, who motioned for me to speak softly. He introduced himself as Nick, and instructed me to follow him, for the others would soon be there. When I inquired what he meant by the others, Nick told me there was no time to explain and hurried forward on hushed footsteps. As we tiptoed through the darkness, it soon became apparent that we were dodging something other than a regular path. We were also dodging headlights. Cars kept pulling up to Donnelly Park. The people who came out were dressed nicely, and seemed to be talking pleasantly with their fellow denizens of this mysterious town while carrying what appeared to be neatly folded robes underneath their arms. We finally stopped behind an oak that was big enough to conceal Nick and myself comfortably. He told me that he had to join the other residents for what he called the rites. Before I could ask what he meant, he told me that I could observe the rites until I heard a particular phrase, then I had to turn away, and not look. No matter what I heard. The phase in question was a quite cryptic one that when like this, in a world where all is forgotten, more is yet to be. As Nick left, I pondered the phrase a bit, repeating it for both memorization purposes and to comprehend its cryptic meaning and what exactly the rites could entail. A few hours before dawn, it seemed the whole town had gathered just beyond the tree, outside of a large stone slope that stuck out of the ground like a shark's dorsal out of the water. Upon its slightly rounded face was the symbol I saw throughout the town of Black, which was also seen on the right side of the robes of the participants in the rites. At the front of the neatly organized rows of hooded people stood one who, in place of a hood, wore some sort of veiled mask with the insignia to which I had now become accustomed emblazoned in white on the forehead just above the sinister-looking eye holes. He faced the audience and began the rites. He began by explaining of two warring gods. One was a cruel god who created the world and humanity to worship him, and the other a merciful god who eventually led a rebellion and overthrew the first. The creator, as the speaker called the first, was imprisoned in a torture beyond tortures, where he felt the pain of criticism, followed by a multiplication of self, and the cycle repeated again. For years, the creator called out to many, according to the veiled celebrant, finally reaching the ancestors of what was once a mighty tribe known as the Athragok. Their shamans were shown a special sign and a ritual that could release the creator from his torture beyond tortures. In exchange for releasing him, the creator promised the Athragok treasures beyond measure. The bargain was kept, but the creator found that once the sun set, he returned to the torture beyond tortures until the next time the rites were performed. The Athragok also found that they became wide awake at night and tired during the day. However, they found at night that they could see things others can't, such as creatures that appeared as lights of colors not known to ordinary men, and communion with creatures that, as far as I could surmise, were made of living sound and came only about during high holy days of the pagan calendar. When white men came to the town, they were entranced by the unspeakable power the Creator gave them in exchange for performing the rites. They began to perform feats like the Athragak, and eventually built the town of Black around the sacred site, which was disguised as Donnelly Park. The veiled man then said that they were the descendants of the settlers and carried on the rites to glorify the Creator. At this, the audience repeated a chant that I will try my best to write down, for it was not any tongue of man, but rather that of a serpent. The chant sounded like 3 repetitions of the phrase, Hagelmekjvamchpai. Then the veiled celebrant turned to the wall, extended his arms and said, "In a world where all is forgotten, more is yet to be." I didn't remember to turn away though, and that fact still haunts me to this day, for the sight was strange beyond all measure. First, as the crowd chanted that unearthly phrase, the sunlight crept unnaturally, as if it was a non-Newtonian fluid pouring onto a substance, but in reverse. Then, as the sunlight touched the lines of that symbol, it began to be filled with something that wasn't quite light, but wasn't quite darkness either. As the profane sign began to be filled, the crowd's chant grew faster and faster, as the sheer brightness and darkness of the energy filling the sign became so bright it took on a sound of its own, growing so loud that the crowd could barely be heard, and as I restrained a scream, it stopped. Before the wall stood something I could not recreate in an image, even if I had to, for each time I got a grasp on the shape and color of the floating mass of unknown matter, the shape and color changed to something completely different. I soon found myself screaming aloud at the sheer terror that was the Creator, thus drawing the attention of the crowd. They slowly approached me like a horde of nameless ghouls. I could only hear faint murmurs that I couldn't make out, but sounded like nothing of this plane of reality. Swiftly, I turned to run only to find the shapeless thing known as the Creator facing me. Despite its lack of a mouth, I heard something like a voice speak to me and say a name, its name. It struck such fear into me that I will not put it in dismissive, nor will I say it aloud, nor could I, for it was not a word or a sound, but more of a 3-dimensional object. It then rose and I left, no longer having the crowd of the Creator's worshippers follow me. I left Black immediately and, soon thereafter, wound up here in the mental hospital in Sixville. I shall soon be ending it all, and I hope this last story gets found and read by someone who can accept what I saw and not be driven mad by it. Farewell, dear reader. Send my regards to a town called Black. It was just rotten luck. Bad enough that I get stuck in the middle of nowhere, but for a woman like me in her early 30s it was particularly frightening. When my old Buick coughed and sputtered to a stop, I knew I was in for a long night. The nearest town was at least 20 miles away, and God knows where a service station was. I retrieved my cell phone, but out in this part of rural Kansas there was no service. I knew I had only one option. I had to start walking. I took my keys, got out of the car and slung my satchel over my shoulder. 4 miles in any direction, there was only darkness. The autumn night was lonely and a crescent moon was the only light. No glare of city lights, no street lights, only the monotonous stretch of country road which lay before me. I trudged along with only the cool October breeze and cloudy sky to keep me company. I had been walking about a mile, and as I topped a hill, I saw the flash of headlights coming in the opposite direction. I frantically waved to the motorist, and he obligingly stopped. "Thank God," I cried. "My car broke down. Do you think I can get a lift to town?" The bespectacled driver looked me over for a moment, then agreed. Now I'm not in the habit of accepting rides from strangers, but this was an emergency after all. I climbed into the front passenger seat and placed my bag on the floorboard. "Thank you so much," I said. "You're a real lifesaver." "Don't mention it," the driver responded. I was a little apprehensive about hitchhiking, especially this late at night. Mother warned me never to accept a ride from a stranger, and she was right. I knew plenty of people who regretted it. The young man seemed pleasant enough, though, and might even be amiable company on the drive to town. He was about my age with light brown hair trimmed in a crew cut. He was neatly dressed in blue jeans and a faded t-shirt that read Megadeth. He sported a pair of worn sneakers and a gold chain lay loosely around his neck. "My name is Andy," my benefactor announced, as he stuck out his hand. "Hi, Andy, I'm Amanda." "Amanda Cummings, where are you headed, Amanda?" he asked. "I was headed into Dalton, but for now I'll settle for anywhere." Andy started the car once more, and drove off into the darkness. "Awful late for you to be out here driving alone," he said. "I feel pretty safe," I lied. "There's not much out here but open farmland." "I guess you haven't heard about the trouble they've had here lately," Andy replied. "What kind of trouble?" "Murderers. Really gruesome, too. 11 so far this year. The newspapers call the guy Cupid because he stabs his victims in the heart. Nasty business." I looked straight ahead, trying not to make eye contact. He made me nervous with such an unusual opening statement, but I tried not to show it. "Is that so?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "That's what they say. Police are kinda sketchy about it, the newspapers too." "Yeah, you sure picked a bad area for a breakdown." I was starting to feel uncomfortable, not only because of the topic of conversation, but because he seemed to smile as he recounted the details. Not only that, 8 of the victims were couples parked in a lover's lane, and he continued abruptly, "Pretty fitting for a guy called Cupid, huh? There were also a couple of truckers, and a hooker. Can you imagine, 11 people, all stabbed right through the heart?" Andy smiled broadly. "I bet they never catch him." We sat in silence for a few moments until Andy blurted out, "You're a really attractive woman." I found myself involuntarily blushing, not only from the compliment, but from the sudden and inappropriate nature of the comment. Well, thank you," I stammered. "I didn't mean to embarrass you. It's just me. I tend to say things without thinking. Just an old habit." "It's all right," I reassured him. "It's just good to have some company sometimes," he said. He paused, then seemed deep in thought about the situation. "I like driving these lonely country roads at night. You never know what you'll find, or who. You're lucky I came by when I did," Andy added. "Lots of times I drive all night without seeing a single person." Andy was starting to sound creepy, so I tried to change the subject. "So, are you from around here, Andy?" "Yeah, I was born and raised in Dalton." "You from the area too?" "No, I'm from Riley, about 30 miles north of here." "I've never been to Riley," he stated. "I like this area, plenty of work to do. Lots of farmland too, not too many nosy neighbors." "Do you have family here?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. "No, they're all dead." "Sorry to hear that," I replied. "It was a long time ago." We sat in silence for several minutes as the stripes on the roadway disappeared one by one beneath the car and the trees along the road waltzed their graceful pirouette. The moon played a mocking game of hide-and-seek behind the clouds, alternately shining and fading into the night. Suddenly Andy spoke and startled me. "Are you married, Amanda?" "No, I live alone," I began, but cut my sentence short, thinking I might be revealing too much information. "It's just me and my big German shepherd, Bozart." I emphasized the word big, and for good measure added, "The name means vicious in German." "Never much cared for dogs," he claimed. "Had one bite me one night while I was working." "What kind of work do you do that keeps you up at night?" I asked, not really sure I wanted an answer. "Oh, just this and that," he said, then after a long pause, "Maybe I can show you." A truly chilling realization came over me, and I began to fidget. I guess he noticed because he then asked, "Something the matter?" No, not at all, but I'm sure he guessed that wasn't true. We drove again in silence for what seemed an eternity. I wanted nothing more than for him to pull over and stop. His headlights cut a swath with the only light on the road. The moon had disappeared and the stars stayed hidden behind the layer of clouds. It was an eerie darkness made all the darker by the sinister air of my traveling companion. I looked out the window into the impenetrable night. Not a hint of another human being or civilization. Just the vast blackness of eternal emptiness. "Nothing around here for miles," Andy suddenly said as if reading my mind. "Yeah, that Cupid guy has the right area. I bet he could kill anyone out here and no one would ever hear a thing." I knew what I wanted to do, what I had to do. "Please pull over," I said, "I don't want to be any more trouble and I can walk from here." "Believe me, it's no trouble," he replied and kept driving. "It's not much further." After a few more minutes of uncomfortable silence, Andy suddenly remarked, "Did you hear that?" I heard nothing and told him so. "Now I definitely heard something," he said. "Sounds like the tire is getting low or something. I better pull over, take a look." Andy finally stopped the car, then turned to me and said, "Now don't go anywhere. This will be over in a minute." He got out and opened the trunk. I couldn't see him but I heard him rummaging. This was my opportunity, I thought. I yanked open the door, grabbed my satchel, and jumped out. I ran as well as I could in my heels, then lay down in the tall grass and breathlessly waited for him. I was terrified when I saw a flashlight gleaming from the roadway, searching for me. My heart pounded. What if he sees me? What if he has a gun? I wanted to run, I wanted to stay, my mind raced, but I knew I must keep absolutely still. "Amanda," Andy called, "come out, Amanda, I'm not going to hurt you." The beam of light came closer and closer, shining just above my head like a predator searching for prey. When the beam was only a few feet away, I saw another light suddenly appear on the roadway. A passing motorist pulled up and asked if Andy needed help. "No," he shouted back. Then he added, "Just looking for a lost dog. You want some help?" The stranger offered. "No thanks. I guess she's not here." The other motorist politely remained and waited for Andy to return to his car. He started the engine, and drove away as did the other motorist. I lay in the grass for a moment until his taillights disappeared. I was truly disappointed. The knife I'd taken from my satchel was ready and only waited for Andy to come a little closer. I was afraid he'd see me with that flashlight and realize what I intended to do. Just think, Andy would have made my number 12. Cupid strikes again, and even a dozen. I put the knife back in my satchel and was resigned to wait for number 12 a little longer. As I said, it was just rotten luck. She stood still. She has her mother's bright blue eyes, Daddy's little angel does. And the most beautiful smile you've ever seen. She could melt an iceberg, she could. Everyone that knows her just loves her to death, and I'm so proud to call myself her father. She's a gift from above, I know it, which is why I must protect her, no matter what the cost. Some people just don't understand. It all started a couple of weeks ago. Some nasty little girl was teasing Katie, my little angel. and she just wouldn't leave her alone. She was saying nasty things, saying how poor she was and saying she was dirty and such. She just had the filthiest mouth. Little girls shouldn't be so nasty. Well, she followed Katie home that day, throwing dirt at her and telling her to take a bath in it. Well, my Katie showed her what's what. Yes, she did. And Daddy couldn't be more proud. I don't think anyone should hurt a child, even if they don't mean it. Don't get me wrong. But Katie never did anything to anyone, and I love her to death. You've got to understand. I was only being a loving father when I hid the body. You see, we live in a very rural area, and that nasty-mouthed little girl clearly had no business following my Katie in the first place. But I know no one would understand, and I just can't let anything happen to my little angel. Of course, that's when my wife came home and saw that our little girl had a few bruises. Can you believe she actually glared at me? As if I'd ever so much as think of hurting my little angel. Of course I was upset, but the sweetheart that she is, Katie set her on track sure enough. She told her how the filthy little girl harassed her and wouldn't leave her be. And I tell you, that lit my wife right up. She was so angry. I had to restrain her. She was gonna call her parents then and there. It was 9 in the evening. Well, I finally talked her down, even though she was furious with me that I hadn't handled it sooner. Of course by then she just didn't trust me to settle it no matter what I told her. I said I'd do it first thing after work the next day, but no. She insisted she'd call them herself the next day. Even Katie pleaded with her not to call her parents. She said she'd be so embarrassed at school if everyone found out. She'd run home and told Mommy. Of course we both knew we couldn't explain that the filthy little girl had gone missing after their little scuffle. Now could we? I mean, she's my wife and I loved her. But she just wouldn't understand. But she just sent Katie straight up to bed and wouldn't hear another word from me on the matter. Her mind was made up. And she's a very headstrong woman. It's part of her charm, you see, so there's no arguing with her once she's made up her mind on a matter. Well, after that I went to tuck the little angel in and read her a bedtime story, and she begged me not to let Mommy call the filthy girl's parents, but I told her how persistent Mommy is, and that she wouldn't listen to me. Of course that didn't sit well with Katie at all. She knew that Mommy wouldn't understand. And neither would her schoolmates' Mommy. No, especially not her. I told Katie I would think of something, and I promised that I wouldn't let anything happen to her. But Daddy's little angel is clever. Daddy's little angel already had her mind made up. I should have understood. The next day I came home to see my wife lying at the bottom of the stairs in a crumpled bloody heap. There was so much blood, and it had long since dried into the carpet when I got home. She had never made it to work that morning. The official story was that she had taken a nasty fall down the stairs and cracked her head open like an egg on her tumble. But as I look into Katie's eyes, so empty, so emotionless. No. Daddy's little angel did not hurt anyone that didn't try to hurt her first. She's special. Anyhow, there was a funeral and the whole family showed up. Katie couldn't have been more bored. She just sat there staring into nothingness as the eulogy was given. When it came time to view the corpse, she barely gave it a glance. I like to think she's coping with the loss her own way. Daddy's little angel loved her Mommy more than anything. It was just before the burial the next day that an investigator showed up at the door. It was Katie that answered as I was rushing to get ready. I rushed to the door as this man was questioning my little girl, gently scooted Katie out of the way and stepped up to the door. "May I help you?" I asked, trying to sound polite. "I need to ask you some questions about the circumstances of your wife's death," the investigator said. "Who are you?" I think some of my frustration was coming through, but it might have been my self-consciousness. "I'm sorry," he said with a laugh. "Detective Kimball, local PD. I just got the results back from the autopsy, and the blunt trauma your wife suffered, and the bloodstains found on the carpet don't exactly match up. I was wondering if you could give me a little more insight." "Well, I'd love to, Detective, but as I told the responding officers, I only found the body when I came home from work. I wasn't here to see it happen." The detective tried to speak again, I think, but I cut him off. Frustration was filling me. "If you'll excuse me, we have a burial to attend." I grabbed Katie's hand and walked her out the door, locking it behind me. I glanced back to see that the detective was watching me as we drove away. Katie was silent the entire trip there and back, and as soon as we got home she retreated to her room. The poor baby has it so rough, all this death surrounding her. I shampooed the carpet the best I could to get the stains out, and fixed up dinner for us. We ate in silence, and it filled me with pain to see her suffering. I'll never forget, just before she got up to take her plate to the sink she looked at me and smiled so softly. "Oh, my little angel has the sweetest smile you ever did see." A couple days passed, and I thought things were getting back to normal, well, as normal as they could be, without my beautiful wife to come home to when it happened. You see, I rush home each day to meet Katie as she's coming in from school, but yesterday I was lost in thought and took my time getting home. You see, the day before my wife's sister suggested that she come over and bring Katie's cousin to visit, and I couldn't refuse. So I had to get in the mindset. I had to show her we were coping. The house was quiet when I got there, but that wasn't so unusual as Daddy's little angel tends to keep to herself and spends most of her time in her room playing with her dollhouse. She's always so clean, and always so quiet. I couldn't have asked for a better little girl. I walked up to check Katie's room and it was empty. I then proceeded to check the rest of the house and found her nowhere, until I came to the door leading to the cellar. Odd, it was cracked. I pushed it open and started down the stairs. I could see the light spilling across the floor at the bottom of the staircase, illuminating a small puddle of blood just a foot from the bottom step. "Just hand me the gun," a voice said softly. "I'll get you out of here, take you somewhere safe." I rushed down the stairs and found Katie standing a mere 2 feet away from Detective Kimball, who sat bound with rope and bleeding from the head. I approached my daughter and eased the gun from her hands as the detective seemed to eye me with the most dreadful gaze anyone's ever given me in my life. I took the gun in my hands, and was surprised at how natural it felt, though I'd never held a gun in my life. The exhilaration that filled me as I lifted the gun and watched the detective's face contort in horror almost sickened me. "Why have you come?" I asked him as I aimed the gun at his head. "Your wife's death was not an accident," he replied. "I was at work when it happened, and Katie was at school. It's been deemed an accident." "What did you hope to find here?" "The coroner stated that she died in the early morning, around the same time you leave for work." I loved my wife. Unconsciously I began to pull the hammer back. "If you kill me, the police will know where to look," Kimball pleaded. "There's no way out of this. Do the right thing. Do it for your little girl. If only you understood." I put a bullet in his head. It's all I could do. Of course I knew he was right. I knew the cops would come soon, looking for him. I turned to my girl. She stood staring at Kimball, vacantly, and I told her to run and get the tarp from the corner. She did. Daddy's little angel is so good. She even helped me wrap the body. And I carved. My sister-in-law showed up that night with her husband and kid, as she said she would, and dinner was ready by 8:30. I really think they loved it, my new recipe. I think they'll be back for more. Credited to Chris Phoenix. Post views, 114,641. Please wait. Well, I've finished my education and learned everything there is to learn about singing, and despite the difficulties, I've found myself at the heart of Music City and struggling to get my material out there. I haven't been able to meet with any labels and I'm barely surviving on gig money. I have an audition at a new place that's opening down by Broadway Street. It's a Vegas-style nightclub, very yuppie. I can sing, but I also have to dance with the other girls. My first song will be Moulin Rouge. They were impressed with my audition, and they may pay me for some choreography ideas. Maybe I can get some hours there. Regardless, times are hard for everyone right now. Any day that people hear me sing is a good day. My voice is lucky, and I'm so excited for the future that I simply had to start writing my feelings down in something other than song form. 2. I learned to bartend and made some good tips this evening. I also sang with the band, and even though everyone there was drunk, I think they really liked me. The more I sing, the more I feel like I was put here on this earth to make people happy with the sound of my voice. I'm not trying to be conceited. I am forged through the sweat of my brow to make beautiful sound. I also make a pretty good vodka martini. 3. My boss, Bobby, thinks he's Bret Michaels. He keeps going on and on about how he's going to make me a star and how much money Alley Cats is going to make with me singing at the helm. People applauded after the girls worked through my dance today. I told Bobby that he should tie cat collars with rhinestones around our necks and buy us hair extensions to attract more clientele. He went for it. I'm excited. I've never been able to afford hair extensions before. The last song I sang before I went home this evening was amazing. I saw a table of drunks in the front row who appeared as if they were crying. That's the best feedback I could possibly ask for. 4. Some of my teachers came by today because it was my day off. They're quiet, mostly, but they expect what I promised them 4 years ago. I always thought I'd be able to get my education and disappear without going through with it, but they found me. They want results, and I only have a month. Even though they paid my way and coddled me through learning the art of vocal performance, I don't think a piece of paper on the wall is worth this. It doesn't matter. I can't back out now, and I'm destined for the big time. Bobby is interested in more than helping me promote my career. I was flirting with a local blues singer in the lounge tonight after singing, and he flipped his shit. Said that I couldn't afford to have a boyfriend in this business and the only person I'd be hooking up with was him if I wanted to keep my job. I noticed that the Better Business Bureau is right across the street when I left today. I'll keep that in mind if he gets out of hand. 5. More teachers came to see me, except they came to the bar itself. I would have been ashamed, except they didn't talk to anyone, so no one knew that they were there for me. They wore the black robes in a nightclub in the middle of the city, so they obviously care little for outward appearances. They focused on me so intently when I was singing that I got scared. I did well, but they're giving me the message, loud and clear. I have to fulfill my part of the bargain or I'll lose my voice. If I lose my voice, I have no future. I'm scared. 7. I had an audition with a major record label on Music Row today. Bobby was pissed that I called out of work, and apparently the regular alcoholics were requesting that I sing a song before they left. One was so adamant that he was arrested for disorderly conduct. I tried to push it out of my mind and focus on the music. They said I had a beautiful natural voice and that with some commercial influence, I could be a star. I'm excited. This is bigger than my graduation or my future wedding day. I'll never forget this day. Even if I tried, the teachers won't let me forget. They have to remind me that I'm only here because of them. 8. Bobby threw me a party tonight to celebrate my big break. He drank too much and so did I. I drove him home and he tried to kiss me. He smelled like bourbon and cigarettes and wouldn't take no for an answer. I screamed, and before I realized that he'd stopped trying to grope me, he was screaming with me. His eyes were glossy, like a windshield that needs a defroster on max. He had this sort of grimace, like he was in pain, but couldn't do anything about it but stare at me and scream and scream. I forced myself to shut my mouth, to stop making any noise, and he collapsed into the passenger floorboard. I got scared and left him there. I'm hoping he'll remember it as an awful hangover and nothing else. If not, there's always the Better Business Bureau. I can't afford to have some stalker ruining my chances of a Grammy. 9. They're here permanently until I deliver on what I promised. They remind me why my voice sounds so sweet, and how they can change it into a terrible force at any time. They asked me if I liked what happened to Bobby. They asked me if I want that to happen to everyone else I sing for. There's nothing I can do to stop this, but as soon as I get it over with, they'll leave me alone forever. They just want their payoff. Someone stopped me on the street today on the way to my car. He really scared me when he said that he knew who was in my apartment with me. He was a relatively big guy, and he looked dangerous, like one of those UFC fighters or a bouncer or something. He told me to get it done and be done with it, that the consequences of going back on them were worse than taking one person's life. He said he'd been swindled by them before, too, and it was the only way to end this. I hope not. I don't think I can bring myself to kill someone, even at the cost of my own gift. I almost went through with it tonight, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Everyone in front of the stage looked like they were having fun, enjoying the company of their friends and boyfriends and girlfriends. They came to hear me. I couldn't betray them. I'll be forced to, soon, and I might lose it all. It doesn't matter. I refuse to kill anyone because they want to listen to my voice. 11. Tonight was the worst night of my life. They've been staying in my room, standing over me as I sleep, hissing in my ear. Deliver. 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 They held me down before I went to work and replaced the rhinestone alley cat uniform collar with some kind of choker. It has one red stone on it, and it glows when I sing. It felt good. I wondered if I had their approval until I got on stage. I started singing, and they all started screaming. Jake, the bartender. My friend Jill, the entire drunken audience. I couldn't stop the sound once I started. My voice soared high, strong, powerful, through the door, out onto Broadway. It brought more and more people in. I saw throngs of people walking through the door, their faces contorted with pain, but it's like they were forced to stand there and listen. I don't know any other way to write this, but I knew they were in the worst pain of their lives. My voice was causing it. All of them screamed until their voices were raw and they had gristled sandpaper in their throats. When I hit my highest note, the entire room was a maelstrom of suffering. People's heads burst open like overfilled balloons. Their skin peeled off in layers and heaped on the line dancing floor like party streamers. The ones who still had faces died with a smile on their face, as if death were a blissful escape. I drove home naked. There was too much blood on my clothes. Bobby was out of town, but he comes back tomorrow, and he already knows. He's too stupid to realize what happened the other night, and thinks someone fired an assault rifle in the middle of the club. Geez, naive. I'll never be able to go back to work again. All I have now is this record deal. I was lucky that the police didn't stop me for questioning. The story is on the local news as the Music Row Massacre. 12. They took off the collar when I got home and they're sitting behind me, watching me write this. They know I have to find their sacrifice to have any hope of recording with the label tomorrow. They said what happened at Alley Cats is my fault. They expect me to get up and go right now, or the choker goes back on. They've turned my own voice against me. I have to use it as a weapon, one last time. I also have to convince Bobby that I want to be with him. The thought makes me want to throw up. 13. I didn't have to report Bobby to the Better Business Bureau. He left me a voicemail as they carried him off, and I know he was only able to speak because they let him. They have a cruel side to them that is unrivaled by any human being. They paid me one last visit, of course. They polished his skull like a fine piece of jewelry and delivered it to me in a box. They said as long as it stayed in the same room with me that I'd sing beautifully. They want to remind me that I killed someone to make it big. I wish I could take all of this back, but I wouldn't, if given the choice. Tomorrow, I record my first album. And nothing will stop my big debut. Credited to Violent Harvest. Post views, 3,335. Please wait.